Tonight, the death of a president, and a nation mourns as we remember George H.W. Bush, the 41st president of the United States.
So help me God.
The man who presided over the end of the Cold War, who led a triumphant effort in another war.
Aggression is defeated. The war is over.
A member of the greatest generation who devoted his life to public service, Navy pilot, congressman, diplomat, vice president, and father of a president, setting an example with his love of country, his devotion to family.
I love you, Precious, with all my heart, and to know that you love me means my life.
And admired for his character, his decency, modesty, and integrity. Tonight, the life and legacy of George Herbert Walker Bush.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. The long farewell to an American president is underway tonight. The country reflecting on the life and honoring the memory of George Herbert Walker Bush, who died last night at the age of 94. A source close to the family confirms his final words, "I love you too," spoken over a speakerphone to his son, President George W. Bush, who told his father he had been a wonderful dad. The senior Bush was a World War II aviator who devoted much of his life to government service as a congressman, ambassador, CIA director, vice president, and ultimately president of the United States.
I come before you and assume the presidency at a moment rich with promise.
For George Bush, becoming president was the capstone of a lifetime of public service that would also include being the father of a president. In fact, the Bush family has been among the most prominent in American political history. But while George Herbert Walker Bush grew up in wealth and privilege and went to the best schools, he also learned the importance of serving his country. A Navy pilot during World War II, he was shot down over the Pacific and rescued by a passing submarine, the moment incredibly captured on camera. He returned home, married his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce, and started a family, moving to Texas in 1948 to get into the oil business. They suffered the loss of daughter Robin to leukemia, but raised 5 children. In 1964, the year he turned 40, Bush got into politics, running for Senate.
I certainly hope, and I'll bet you do too, that our children can grow up knowing what freedom really is.
He lost, but later won a House seat and ran for Senate again in 1970, this time with help from President Nixon.
And George Bush, in my opinion, is the best man for America.
When he lost again, Nixon appointed him ambassador to the UN.
I consider myself a very lucky guy.
But his next job was chairman of the Republican Party during Watergate.
You try being chairman of the Republican Party during the Watergate days. You talk about a ghastly assignment.
Bush escaped Watergate unscathed, and Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, made him his envoy to China.
Put it this way, I'm darn happy about it.
Just a year later, an even bigger assignment.
Director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
CIA, I loved. 1 year only, but I just loved it. I loved defending the culture at a time when everybody was down on it.
When Ford lost to Jimmy Carter, Bush left the CIA.
What he will do next, he didn't say.
What he did next was run for president.
I do pledge a new candor.
Bush lost the nomination to Ronald Reagan in 1980, and his political career seemed over until this stunning announcement.
That George Bush be nominated.
For 8 years, Bush was Reagan's loyal vice president, surviving questions about his role in the Iran-Contra scandal to become Reagan's heir apparent.
I am here today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
Bush emerged from Reagan's shadow.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
And made a promise he would later break.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
George Bush defeated Democrat Michael Dukakis in 1988 and became president of the United States.
So help me God.
The Bush years saw epic events on the world stage. The Tiananmen Square massacre, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the collapse of the Soviet Union itself.
By the grace of God, America won the Cold War.
But his presidency's defining moment was Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait.
This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait.
Backed by an international coalition, Bush launched Operation Desert Storm and drove Iraqi forces out.
Aggression is defeated. The war is over.
But Saddam Hussein remained in power until Bush's son toppled him 12 years later.
I thought Saddam Hussein would fall of his own weight when the war ended. And I thought they'd throw him the hell out of there, and they didn't.
Bush's post-war popularity soared, then sank over economic concerns closer to home. In 1992, he lost to Bill Clinton, becoming a one-term president.
I had my chance. I gave service to this country, and now I'm perfectly content to let history be the judge.
George Bush enjoyed an active retirement, full of grandchildren, fishing, even skydiving. And he saw his eldest son become president. But he kept his advice to a minimum, and his son charted his own course. Bush was no stranger to partisan politics, but he aspired to a higher ideal, as when he teamed up with Bill Clinton on global relief efforts.
You can be political opponents and still work together for something more important than your own political future.
A former president for decades, he saw granddaughter Jenna Bush Hager become a Today Show correspondent.
And what's aging like?
Aging's all right, better than the alternative.
He saw Republicans turn away from the Bush brand and the party establishment it represented.
But the simple fact is...
Excuse me, 1 second.
No.
Rejecting son Jeb's bid for the presidency.
So tonight, I am suspending my campaign.
And he survived his wife of 73 years, Barbara Bush, and welcomed an outpouring of affection for her. Theirs was the longest marriage in presidential history. Throughout his long life, George Bush was admired as a man of decency, modesty, and uncommon achievement, values that, to the end, reflected what was most important to him, his family.
I just want to get up into heaven, and I don't get there by bragging on myself. My mother told me that years ago.
In this country and all over the world, tributes to President Bush today, many world leaders calling him their friend. Others cited his passion for volunteerism and praised him for encouraging bipartisan support of public service. We get more reaction from Gabe Gutierrez.
Outside the Bush home in Houston, a growing memorial.
I will remember him as a kind, wonderful person who did what he thought was best for our country, and he served our country well.
It was here in Texas that President Bush and his beloved late wife Barbara built their life together. Tonight, his loss is felt across the world, from Kennebunkport.
He's a great man. What a life.
To Argentina, where President Trump said Mr. Bush always found a way to set the bar higher.
He was just a high-quality man who truly loved his family.
That family sharing the most poignant tributes to the man they called Poppy. His son Jeb tweeting, "I already miss the greatest human being that I will ever know. Love you, Dad." His granddaughter, our NBC colleague Jenna Bush Hager, said she cried when her precious Gampy told her that he looked forward to the afterlife because I'm going to be reunited with these people that I've lost. His grandson George P. Bush writing, "He was more than a great man. He was a good man. His courage was matched by his compassion." It was that compassion that seemed to bridge the political divide. His one-time rival, former President Clinton, writing that in Mr. Bush's life, people always came before politics, patriotism before partisanship. The Obamas saying that Mr. Bush's life is a testament to the notion that public service is a noble, joyous calling. Fittingly, last month came his final public act. He voted. President Trump said today that Air Force One will transport President Bush's casket from Houston to Washington on Monday, where it will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. According to Texas A&M University, Mr. Bush will then be laid to rest later in the week on the grounds of his presidential library. Lester.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez in Houston tonight. Thank you. It was a father and son story like no other. Two presidents, each presiding over some of the most significant